Hello, I'm Dana Andrews. In an age when man is contemplating travel to the moon, there are still men whose lives are very much dedicated to the earth, to making it yield more food and fiber. For, ironic as it may be, space-age man has not yet conquered his oldest problem, feeding the population of this world. Today, 2/3 of the world is undernourished or starving because in many lands, the farmers cannot produce enough food. The means exist, but first we must plant knowledge and determination in the hearts and minds of those who will grow the food. Our immediate problem is one of communication. We've tried and often failed to convince today's generation their ways are already set. It's tomorrow's generation we must reach with new ideas and motivation. Young minds are ideal for the task. They're guided and tempered by the wisdom of their elders, but are still not so mature that they're limited by the customs and traditions of society. It is truly said that the old have difficulty in communicating with the young. So today, through a 4-H program, a way is being found for the young to communicate with the young. For the youth of the world see and hear facts which we've missed. Their imaginations generate new ideas. They seek a better understanding for a better world, exchanging technological knowledge and philosophy, learning from each other what might just make this old earth tick a little better. The 4-H exchange plan provides an opportunity for full development of youth's potential to build a better understanding, and through it, economic and social progress for all. This is the story of youth, of the power in young ideas. This is the story of a leadership force at work in nations throughout the world. For example, India.
A new flag, a very young nation, India. Today, her new generations salute the future, not her ancient past. Recently, my friends and I shared in that future. As young men and women from American farms, we stood for a great deal. I guess that's why I tried to stand so straight that first day. Each year, the International Farm Youth Exchange, that's a program of the 4-H Club Foundation, sends young Americans to nations throughout the world, and these nations in turn send some of their young farm men and women to visit the United States. In our case, we were guests of the Indian government. What's it all about? Well, even though our vocabularies may differ, young people sort of speak the same language. We understand each other. Take Callion and me, for example. By the looks of that cart, you'd think centuries separated us. But we were already friends by the time we arrived at his home. You see, each delegate had the opportunity to live with several families. Maybe India is a long way from Indiana, but I soon felt at home. So did the other delegates. before long, we were completely wrapped up in our work. That's right, we had a job to do, and a pretty important job at that. We were to travel through the provinces to meet the young men and women of India. We introduced them to plenty of ideas about modern farming. And the biggest idea of all was that they should work together to create change. Unlike their elders, these guys and gals aren't resigned to accepting the problems of an ancient civilization. They believe they can change the very face of their country if someone will only show them how. From their own determined faces, I believe they can too. In fact, everywhere we went, they were eager for change, for the chance to replace the old with the new. We learned recipes thousands of years old. And introduced a few of our own. For centuries, the soil has been broken by a stick plow. But when the land must feed 500 million people, power and modern implements are required. Water can no longer be measured by the bucketful. It must flow from the gates of modern irrigation systems. And though the wheels still turn slowly to produce feed, young India is quickly turning to modern livestock production. Once this field went without fertilizer. But this is changing. Poultry farming is on the rise in India, another sign of progress. Although a majority of Indians are vegetarians, other millions are not. And chicken tastes as good in Delhi as it does in Dixie. But in a land where the wind is still used to separate the chaff from the grain, progress isn't easy. There are no simple answers. Today, more than 80% of India's people are small village farmers with an acre or two of land apiece. In a land of 500 million people, they can scarcely feed themselves. Before too long, India will be a nation of 600 million. But simply giving a man more land won't necessarily enable the Indian farmer to produce more. He'll need tractors, machinery, and fertilizer to increase production. And yet, even if he could feed 30 people, like each American farmer, he'd still have problems. For food needs to be processed. India needs canneries and slaughterhouses before it can really go to market. And meantime, what kind of market awaits the farmer? In India, even when food is transported to the marketplace, it is still difficult to reward the farmer. Without sufficient payment, he can scarcely afford modern farming methods. Actually, this young, determined generation is attempting to step from the shadows of traditions thousands of years old into the light of the 20th century. When an agricultural revolution succeeds, industrialization will follow. India looks to her young to build the future. Yet in the midst of change, the people seek to preserve a rich heritage. A heritage of beauty which surrounds their lives. The more color, the better. Color is everywhere. From bright silks and madras to the rangoli, the traditional welcome for dignitaries. For centuries, audiences have applauded actors and actresses of the Indian stage. With this kind of performance, who needs television? But it is the dance which truly unlocks this nation's creative spirit. Each gesture is an emotion, a dynamic example of rhythmic form. I'll admit I'm not much of a dancer, but if you think an American has trouble keeping in step in India, imagine the problems an Indian has in the United States. This is Basu, one of 16 young men and women visiting the United States from India. For the past few months, he's been living with an American farm family in Nebraska. But right now, he's at a special international 4-H get-together at Kansas State University. This get-together is known as the Midpoint Conference, and 4-H exchange delegates from around the world are gathered at Manhattan, Kansas, to discuss some of the things that they've been learning by living with host families on modern farms. Of course, you can't visit Kansas without talking wheat, and that calls for a visit to the local grain elevator. When you come from a nation of need, a nation of surplus is pretty awesome. But we are not only speaking of nations. We're talking about a world of young people, learning what it means to work together. That's what the International Farm Youth Exchange is all about. A chance for tomorrow's generation to start looking for answers today. It takes a lot of little answers to solve big problems, like a lot of little candles held together. A lot of answers from a lot of young men and women who are listening and learning and searching for ideas. Young ideas that grow and succeed in the years to come. Six months isn't a long time to share with those who are changing the future, but it was long enough to teach me that the people of India are a people whose young pride is tempered by the humility of centuries, whose desire to change is fortified by the dignity of their past. It was time to say goodbye. We headed home. In a matter of hours, we were back in a nation where change is a way of life. We gave a special briefing for the company which helped sponsor this exchange of young ideas between India and the United States. Each of us reported on an aspect of the exchange which he found particularly interesting. The influence of India's religions, her present methods of farming, Some thoughts about her future as seen by the Hawaiian member of our group. The role of women and the need for more exchanges. However our experiences may have varied, we were all agreed on the positive impact of these exchanges. After our presentation, we did our best to answer questions. Actually, all this was good practice for the hundreds of talks we would be making during the coming year. For part of the International Farm Youth Exchange program is to tell other Americans of the world need for food. But we're never so far away from our experiences that we don't recall them often. And when I look back, I see so many faces looking ahead. As members of the International Farm Youth Exchange, we're attempting to communicate with young people throughout the world. However young our ideas may be, they can grow into a new dynamic world where hunger is conquered. For example, India.